Okay, good morning, everybody. Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. We are back. I was away last week, but I'm back. It's good to be back. Let's pick up Tzumam Rabbanan Yachot Shabbat. We're carrying on. Let's pick up. We're now on volume 19. It's on page 207, shir number 5. Move on to a new topic this week, the halachot of opening packages and containers on Shabbat. This is very, very, very relevant. Very practical. We all have packages and containers that we need to open every week. I'm not talking about Amazon packages, but although that is an interesting shiner as well. But we're still in the kitchen. We're still in the kitchen. So we want to know cans and the like. Can we open on Shabbat? You know, you don't always have. A lot of the poskim recommend Shmat Shabbat, and others we'll see. Recommend you should open everything before Shabbat. That way you don't have any shiners, but we all know what Friday afternoon is like in the kitchen, even in the summer. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Shabbos comes in at 4, Shabbos comes in at 8. We spoke about this last week in the context of shaving. And the Mishnah Berurah writes that if Erev Shabbat is a Sha'at Chukalo, Sha'at Adchak, and I said Erev Shabbat is always a Sha'at Adchak. It doesn't matter. So sometimes we don't manage. So the question is also sometimes you can be in places, you know, you have a large kitchen, you're on a camp or something like that, where it's not always practical to open everything before Shabbat. So the question is, what can and can't be opened on Shabbat itself? And so when we talk about opening cans, packages, containers, etc., what are the possible melachot that we may face? Which of the 39 melachot might we encounter when it comes to tearing and opening, etc.? So we have, you might say tearing. I just mentioned you might say tearing. That's an interesting one. We'll see. I'm not going to get into today. We're not going to get into the discussion of what happens if you tear on the writing, and then you have the malacha of erasing. Right? That's a separate discussion, which the poskim raise. If you have a package which has writing on it, and you tear across the writing, that's something which is a very, very practical question which comes up as well. But before that, we have basically the poskim raise. We have the malacha of boneh and the malacha of soter. The melachot of building something, creating something, and soter, which is destroying. Now, destroying, like tearing, is one of those melachot, interestingly, which is actually a destructive melacha, which goes against the very essence and the very definition of melacha. Part of the definition of melechet machshevet, as we've discussed, is that it has to be constructive. How can you have a melacha which is destructive? So if you look at the Mishnah, it says that the melacha of soter, of destroying, is actually the melacha of soter al manat livnot. It's when we destroy something in order to build, in order to lay the foundations for something else. What's tearing, what's erasing, in order to write, etc. So we'll have to see how that comes up. But basically, the poskim talk here about boneh and soter, of building and destroying. We'll find a fascinating discussion. When you open a can, if there is a melacha involved, we'll get to it. Some say yes, some say no. But if there is a melacha which is involved, we'll find two really contradictory approaches in the Achronim. There are those who say that there would be a violation of the melacha of boneh, and there are those who say exactly the opposite. It would be a violation of the melacha of soter. And how you can get around that, according to those opinions, is going to depend on what the prohibition is. So, but we talk about boneh, we talk about soter. We also talk about, we can discuss makeh patish, is the final hammer blow, finishing an object. Maybe that is involved here as well. There's also a rabbinic prohibition, which is discussed, what's known as metaken mana, which is fixing a kli, which is maybe related to boneh or soter or makeh patish, right? That may be. So these are the primary discussions that we're going to see. So first off, let's have a look at these melachot. Let's look at some of the parameters of how they work, and then let's see how that applies, if it applies to our cans and containers and packages, etc. So we begin on page 207. Source number 1, we have the Rambam in the 10th parak of Hilchot Shabbat. Says the Rambam, Aboneh, koshu chayav. Somebody who builds, even the smallest amount is going to be chayav. There's no minimum share for boneh, for building. Example, hamashveh pnei akalka bebayit, kegon sheshpil tel umile guma, ogai aleze boneh vechayav. So somebody who levels the floor inside the house is liable. Okay, we'll talk later on. I think the next topic that we have after we finish this is some of the halachot relating to home maintenance. So they will discuss in terms of sweeping the floors. Remember, in the days of the Gemara, probably in the days of the Rambam as well, your floor was essentially dirt. So if you were sweeping the floor, you could come to smooth out the ground. That could be a problem. Nowadays, we have tiled floor. Sweeping is not the same thing. But whether one lowers or raises a raised piece of earth or fills a cavity, etc., all these are considered building, and one would be liable. Okay. Now notice all these examples that he gives. We're talking about building. We're talking about building, contributing to the building of your house, or contributing to something which is on the ground. Right. Generally speaking, the malacha boneh and soter is related to the karka, or something which is mechubar la karka. When we start talking about packages and cans and different things, or what we would call kelim, right, vessels which are not related to karka, so we'll see whether the malacha there applies as well. Hasoter kosher chayav, and so too one who demolishes even the smallest amount. V'ushi yishtor menat livnot, says the Rambam. That is, as we discussed, one who is demolishing in order to build. Hasoter or kavua shepolek etz takua l'ezit toledat soter v'chayav v'ushi yitkaven letaken. So somebody demolishes a permanent tent, separates a piece of wood, attached to another, etc. All these are liable for a toledah of soter. Again, so long as you're doing it in order to improve it, in order to build further. So again, boneh and soter, clearly, these are melachot. We know these are 2 of the 39 melachot. They relate to something that is connected to the ground. What about something that is not connected to the ground? Again, kelim, kelim shonim, right? Would that be the melacha there apply as well? So turn over the page. Look at source number 2. You have the Gemara Masechet Shabbat. Here the Gemara Braita tells us as follows. It says, Tanu Rabbanan, Delet shel shida v'shel teva v'shel migdal. Okay, I have a chest or a box or a closet or something like that, which has a door. Not lin, avalo machzirin. You can remove the door from its hinge on Shabbat, but you cannot restore it. V'shalul shel tanagolin not li v'lo machzin. If we're dealing with the door of a chicken coop, okay, I'm sure you all have chicken coops in your homes. If you're dealing with a door there that you cannot remove or put back, that's more stringent. The Gemara explains, you'll see in footnote number 2, that's more stringent because that is generally attached to the ground. Okay. Amar Rava, but what do we see here? We see that with the Shida, Teva, Migdal, you're allowed to remove the door. So Amar Rava Kasava en biyam b'kelim, en stira b'kelim. V'gzera shema yitka. Why would you be allowed to move it? It must be that we say there is no binyan and stira when it comes to kelim. Okay, putting it back, we're worried. There's a gzera. Rashi explains in source number 3. He says gzera shema yitka b'chozka b'sakin v'tedot. You're going to come. You're going to put it back. You're going to really, you want it to be back properly. You're going to put out your knife and your pegs and your tools, and you're going to perform it in such a way that it's going to be actually makeh b'patish. But yeah, just to remove it. So the clear implication of the Gemara seems to be that there is no binyan and stira b'kelim. Okay, so we can end the share over there. There's no binyan and stira b'kelim. You can open your cans. You can do whatever you want. If only it was that simple. Right? It's never that simple. So says that we have another source. Okay, we have another source in the Gemara in Masechet Beitzah. Here in source number 4. Okay, those who are in the Beitzah Gemara share during the week. We discussed it some time ago. The Mishnah talks about Shlosha Dvarim. Rabban Gamliel Machmir K'divrei Beit Shammai. There are 3 cases whereby Rabban Gamliel was stringent, like the opinion of Beit Shammai. One of them was Ein Zokvin Tam Menorah B'Yom Tov. You have the sort of menorah which is made of metal pieces, and you cannot set it up on Yom Tov. That, according to Beit Shammai. According to Beit Hillel, you can. So says the Gemara, Ma'ika Avid, what is the problem? What have you done? Okay, it's got different parts, different links. The michze keboneh, and it looks like, when you put it together, it looks like you're building. The Beit Shammai savri yesh binyan b'kelim, uBeit Hillel savri ein binyan b'kelim. Okay, so there you have it explicitly. Again, that's the second place where the Gemara says, according to Beit Hillel at least, but there is no binyan or stira b'kelim. So Rashi explains, source number 5, says, Eino chayav ela in ken asabo melacha. If, when I am putting this kli together, there was another melacha that was involved, going memachek or mechatech or reg or tofer, she'en avot melachot la'atzman. And you're cutting, you're weaving, you're sewing, etc. These are their own melachot. So there, that would be a problem. Aval chazarat choliot she'ein ba'ela mishum binyan ein boneh ela b'batim ba'olim. Only when it comes to houses and tents and things which are attached to the ground, there I'm going to have a problem of there I'm going to have a problem of binyan. Okay, so
this would also for Lego, in a sense, wouldn't it? Lego blocks that you might want to put together on the Shabbat. They're also, I'm not sure it can be, but you're trying to fix pieces together like this.
Right. Okay, yeah. So the Lego blocks is definitely there's definitely a shaila. So we're going to see. So far it seems to be that we say there is no such thing as binyan v'stira b'kelim. That would certainly be on a Doraita level. We have to ask, maybe on a Daraban level there still is, or maybe the truth is it's going to be a Gemara that's going to, let's see one more Gemara before that, but there's going to be a Gemara here which is going to really make us question this whole the whole thesis that we've said until now. We'll get to very, very shortly. But first of all, one more source in the Mishnah, in source number 6, where the Mishnah Yaron Shabbat also says, Shover Adam et Achavit. Until now, we've been talking primarily about binyan. This is more talking about stira. Right? Shover Adam et Achavit le'chol emena grogarot b'vad shelo yitkaven la'asot kli. So it says a person has a barrel that wants to break the barrel that contains dried figs. One wants to break the barrel in order to get to the food that is inside. So you can do that so long as you are not trying to make a kli. Meaning when you break it, you make the hole in such a way that you can reconstitute it for purpose. So here in the Kahati commentary says, Shover Adam Tachavit. Very interesting. Kahati, that is the commentary on the Mishnah that everybody uses, right? It's become pretty much standard. He was it's a commentary of Rav Pinchas Kahati, but he was not a teacher or rabbi for a living. He was actually a banker, and in his spare time he used to write commentary on Mishnah. Right? Just goes to show what you can do. So he said, Shover Adam Tachavit. Yeah, we're dealing with kilkul. You're destroying the barrel. You're not doing anything constructive, and that to destroy for the purpose of food on Shabbat, even lekatchila you can do. But you're going to make a proper, nice opening. Okay, it's going to be very, very relevant when we get to our cans and containers, etc. Because yesh bo mishum tikun kli. You're therefore improving it. Okay, Rashi understands that this is maybe related to the malacha of makeh the patish. Okay, so the first thing to note is this: even if we say that there is no binyan in stira b'kelim, it could be that there are other malachot that are involved in that action, whether it's smoothing or cutting or makeh patish or whatever it is. So one has to ensure that is not taking place there. That is not taking place there as well. Okay, now what kind of opening exactly are we going to be concerned about? So the Gemara, source number 8 says as follows over the page. Top now of page 210 says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, Dvar Torah. I think that Yud is not meant to be there. Dvar Torah, Kol petach she'eno asoy lachnis o lotzi, eino petach. We talk about an opening. Generally speaking, an opening is one that you can insert and you can take out of. It can go in both directions. Okay, so meaning if it's a small sort of hole that you can maybe pour out of, but you can't put in, that's not considered a nice opening, etc. Okay, so until this point, we've seen what we said about binyan stira b'kelim. Now we get to the Gemara Masechet Eruvin. Okay, and this is going to cause a bit of make things a bit more complicated. Gemara here in source number 9 tells us as follows. The Mishnah says, "Netano b'migdal ve'avad ha'mafteach halei ze eruv." Okay, believe it or not, the Mishnah, which is the Masechet Eruvin, is discussing the topic of eruv. Okay, over here we're dealing with an eruv tchumin. There are 3 types of eruv that we have in halacha. Right, we have an eruv chatzerot, we have an eruv tchumin, and we have an eruv tafshilin. Eruv tafshilin is to prepare food in order to allow us to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbat, which is adjacent, not the other way around like we had this year, right? Shabbat that comes before Yom Tov, you cannot do any preparation from Shabbat for Yom Tov because Shabbat is a higher level of Kedusha. From Yom Tov to Shabbat you could, so long as you've prepared the Eruv Tavshilin. Right? It comes up every now and again. In footnotes it's far more common just because you have the extra day of Yom Tov, so it works out more commonly that you need it, but in Israel as well, that is an Eruv Tavshilin. An Eruv Chatzerot, when we generally speak about the Eruv, it's one of those things that's a misnomer. We talk about an Eruv. Which type of Eruv are we talking about? Well, we are in a way talking about Eruv Chatzerot, but we're really talking about something else. when you say, is the Eruv up or is the Eruv down, you're generally talking about the Tzurat HaPetach. We have in our cities, if we want to carry, an Eruv Chatzerot is a mechanism whereby if I have a Chatzer and I have a courtyard and there are different houses in the Chatzer, and each house is considered its own Reshut HaYachid. So Rabbanan said that to carry from one Reshut HaYachid to another within the courtyard, you cannot do unless you have an Eruv Chatzerot. What's the Eruv Chatzerot? The word Eruv means literally to mix up, to mix everything together. So I have a box, generally you have some bread, or generally speaking, a box of matzah, because box of matzah can go moldy. I have seen this, but it generally happens, it's not quite the same way as bread. Okay, so you have, that's placed inside one of the homes. Whoever makes the Eruv will make a kinyan, and that is jointly owned by all the people in the different homes, and that Eruv, that is the mechanism that allows one to carry between. Now, when you have a citywide Eruv, not everybody knows this, but you need the Eruv Chatzerot as well, that you have that somewhere. But that only works if I'm dealing with an area that is completely enclosed. It's completely enclosed, so it's all considered really on the Doraita level, like a Reshut HaYachid. How do I enclose it? So either you have walls around the whole city. Generally speaking, that's not so practical. So we build the Eruvim through Tzurat HaPetach. You have a pole on this side, you have a pole on that side, you have a string that goes across. That's the shape of a doorway, right? That's a Tzurat HaPetach and different things. It's not a share on Ilchot Eruvin, but that is essentially, that's the Eruv Chatzerot. And then you have the Eruv Tchumin. Eruv Tchumin, again, not a lot of people know this, because nowadays we're just in the city, where most of the time we don't even think about walking beyond the city on Shabbat. But if one wanted to walk beyond the city limits, you have 2,000 amot as to where you can go in each direction. Where this does come up, sometimes people go on holiday. In the summer, you're in some Airbnb. Again, in Israel, less common, but you go off to some holiday resort, wherever. Okay, and you want to walk and you want to extend how far you can go. So then you would need an Eruv Tchumin. Eruv Tchumin is a certain amount of food that you place at the boundary, and you're allowed to extend how far you can go beyond the Eruv. Okay, now part of the idea of the Eruv, all these things, is that the Eruv Tchumin, one has to be able to access it. If his Eruv Tchumin is in a different Reshut, or it's in a different place where he can't go there, so then it's meaningless. So here the Mishnah talks about the following. It says you have your Eruv Tchumin, but you have it in a place where you can't access it. Okay, you have this food, and it's Natano b'migdal, ve'avad ha'mafteach. Okay, so it says you've placed it in some sort of a cupboard or something, and you've locked it, and you lost the key. So then now you can't access it. So the Mishnah says, even though you can't open it, nonetheless, hareze eruv. Okay, why? So the Gemara says, Amai, huv makom echad, ve'eruvo makom acher. It says, why should it be a valid eruv? You're in one place. The point is you don't have the key, and the eruv is somewhere else. So how can it be? So have a look. You see, it says as follows. The Gemara later suggests that the Mishnah is referring to types of vessels from which one is permitted to access the eruv inside. Within the discussion, the Gemara indicates that the cupboard mentioned by the Mishnah is classified as a vessel. But if so, why is the individual unable to reach his eruv? Shouldn't he be able to break the cupboard according to the Mishnah that we saw previously in Masechet Shabbat? Right, that's the question. Meaning, we're not going to get into now the technicality of Hilchot Eruv. But the point is that the Mishnah here assumes, the Gemara assumes, that the key is there, the food is there, you cannot access it because you don't have the key. But why can't you break open the cupboard to get the food, the same way that you could have broken open the barrel in order to get inside? So Tosfot discusses this, and Tosfot is going to give us three different answers. And we'll see what the other Rishonim say, and depending on which answer of Tosfot we accept, that's going to be a big enough kamina for our whole sugya. Okay? So Tosfot says like this: Im tomar v'ha hashtasal kadatach the migdal eitz aili davei kli. We're dealing with some standard wooden cupboard. Ve'od l'stam migdal shebashash shel eitz v'imken mai palich halei mutar l'shaber et hakli v'litol ma shebetocho. So surely, right? We could break it open. Just the same way we said that you could break open a barrel. So Tosfot gives here three answers, three suggestions. Okay, answer number one. He says, Yesh lomar, demash malei b'migdal gadol, d'shayach binyan v'stila. First answer is, when we were talking about a barrel, whatever, we're talking about a small barrel. Okay, yeah, talking about a migdal, we're talking about a cupboard, a large cupboard. Okay, and therefore we would say binyan and stira do apply. Why does it make a difference whether it's large, whether it's small? Maybe whether it's large, it's harder to move, it's more connected to the ground. Okay, we can, but it's a different kind of thing. But if it was, according to that answer, if it was small, you'd be allowed to break it. But if it's large, not. Answer number two, the answer number two is, in fact, we do say that binyan and stira platz kelim. What about the Gemara that we saw before that said no? Maybe the right versus Rabbanan. Okay, the ha deshali l'shaber chavit hamuki rababeitza b'mustaki. Okay, that which we said that you can break open the barrel to get that which is inside, that was a special type of barrel. It's called a mustaki. What is a mustaki? Sounds a little bit like mastic, which is chewing gum in modern Hebrew. It's got nothing to do with chewing gum, but it's a mustaki. That is a phrase which the Gemara in Beitza talks about. Okay, we'll talk about that soon. I think we have it here at the bottom of the page. Yeah, we have that Gemara exactly at the bottom of the page. It's our next source. Okay, so we'll talk about that. Essentially, it means it's a reconstituted vessel, meaning it's not a proper kli. It's a kli that was, and then it was broken and it was put back together. So it's already not exactly a proper kli. It's only been reconstituted, and therefore breaking it. You're not really breaking it because it was already kind of broken to begin with. And that's what we allow when we say the vessel, but not just any ordinary container. Okay. Continues to us with answer number three. It says, "How does the time of migdal even avar migdal etz naseh kashover tachavit litom min hagulgaot mashma tebelo mustaki nami shali bekli shal etz." Okay. Answer number three is it's not related to a mustaki necessarily, but it depends what it's made of. He makes a distinction here between a kli which is made of wood versus a kli which is made of stone. And therefore he says if it's made of wood, you can break it. Okay, so those are the three distinctions that Tosfot makes. One of the three. He said, right, we started off, we began by saying Ein binyan v'stira b'kelim. And then we said that we have a Gemara which proves that the Gemara talking about a barrel, that you can break the barrel in order, so long as you don't make a nice opening, but you can break the barrel to get to that which is inside. But then we saw the Gemara in Eruvin, and it seems to have like you can't break a migdal. So can you break it or can't you break it? What's the difference? Tosfot says either the difference is between something that is big or something that is small, or the difference is the third approach. He said depends what it's made of. If it's made of wood or if it's made of stone. Or he said if it's a mustaki, meaning that which you're allowed to break is only that which is this mustaki, this reconstituted vessel. So we'll see in a moment different Rishonim accept different explanations that are brought by Tosfot. The Rosh is going to accept the second approach, and that is what the Shulchan Aruch is going to say as well. So let's try and understand it a little bit better. That is the Gemara over here, source number 11. Now, Masechet Beitza tells us a little bit more about this mustaki. It says, late Rabbi Eliezer had it none. Over here, the Mishnah says it according to Rabbi Eliezer, but according to these opinions, this would be the opinion of the other Tanaim as well. Right? If we accept the other opinions of Tosfot, then this is just the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, and then that would be a question whether we accept it l'halacha or not. So he says, "Lately, Rabbi Eliezer ditnan shover adam et hachavit lechom mimena grogarot u'bevad shelo yitkaven lasot kli." That's exactly the Gemara that we saw, right? So Amar Rav Ashi ki tanya ai, that which we said that you are allowed to. We're at the top of page 212 now. But that which we said that you are allowed to break open the barrel in order to get to the food inside, that is kitanyai b'mustaki. That is when it is a mustaki. So what does that mean? What exactly is this mustaki? Says Rashi. He says chavit shvula shemedamkin shvalea b'sarav shel et shekolin shaf. Right? He says you had a barrel. It was already broken, and you took the shards and you glued them together. Okay, they didn't have glue in those days like we have nowadays, I guess. So you use sap from a tree. That's what the glue. And this is called b'lashon Arabic mustaki. This is something. This is the same way that you would join together broken pottery shards, etc. Okay, okay. Now we all understand this is not like the kli when you first construct it. It's much more flimsy. It's an inferior vessel, and therefore you don't need to be worried that again. What's going to be the problem if you do break it open? It's a little bit counterintuitive. But if you break it open, we say that's an issue not necessarily of destroying, but that's an issue of creating. Because by breaking it open, you create a nice opening, you create a nice vessel that you can use. He says that if it's already broken to begin with, you're not really going to do that. You're going to start breaking it open, and it's just going to fall apart. And therefore, everybody's going to agree that by the mustaki there is no issue of opening it and of breaking it. The issue would that extend to other kelim as well. But according to this opinion, that would not be a problem. Okay, now Rashi over here, source number 14, you'll see Rashi actually says, he said mishum boneh leika lechiyuve lo b'chavit v'lo b'tanur v'lo b'kaveret t'ein binyan b'kelim. Okay, Rashi seems to be much more lenient to say there is no binyan kelim at all whatsoever. The Ran, source number 15, he seems to accept the first opinion of Tosfot, right? Which is it depends if we're dealing with something large or something small. He says just the line which says in bold. He says migdal katan lo shaycha binyan ustira. With a small cupboard, there is no binyan ustira. Okay, so you see here the summary in the middle of page 213 of the summary box in the middle. We've seen three approaches in the Rishonim regarding this the parameters here of binyan ustira and kelim. Okay, it's out of order of the approaches in Tosfot, but Tosfot's second approach, that is the Rosh, who said building and dismantling applied to fashioning regular whole vessels, again, but not reassembled vessels, inferior vessels like a mustaki. The third approach of Tosfot, which is Rashi, which is that building and dismantling generally do not apply to vessels at all. And the approach of the Ran, it said it depends if we're dealing with large vessels or small vessels. Okay, so these are the three opinions in the Rishonim. Which one do we accept? So see the Shulchan Aruch in source number 16. Says the Shulchan Aruch, "En binyan ustira b'kelim." There is no building or dismantling when it comes to vessels. Kelim ani mele she'eino binyan mamash kegon chavit. Well, that is where there is no. When do we say there's no binyan and ustira b'kelim? When there's no actual binyan, like right? Kegon chavit shenishbara. That's the mustaki. That's the example where it had broken and you're joining it together. So that's not going to be binyan. At the bottom now in bold. Okay, if it's intact, then you cannot break it even if you're not making a vessel like that. That would seem to be binyan and stira that does apply. Okay, so that's the Shulchan Aruch. He goes by the second opinion there of Tosfot and the Rosh, which is a little bit more stringent than what we said at the beginning. The Mishnah Berurah over here, source number 17, says, "B'biur hagrai skim laposkim, t'svir lo da'en stira b'kelim, afilu k'she'oseh shvira b'kli shlema. Im lo k'she'oseh ota kli al yedei shvira, da'az chayav al kol panim l'kol ha'ama mishum makeh b'patish." Okay, so that's the Gra, the Mishnah Berurah says, who is more lenient. He accepts the opinion that says, really, when we say binyan ein binyan v'stira b'kelim, we mean it. We mean there's no binyan ustira b'kelim unless you're making a very, very nice hole, right, and opening, and therefore that would be makeh b'patish. Okay, so just to summarize again what we said until this point, we started off the shiva saying binyan and stira, the melacha certainly applies to karka, applies to the ground or anything that's connected to the ground. Do we say binyan and stira b'kelim? So we have a number of places where the Gemara tells us and binyan v'stira b'kelim. The question is, what does that mean? Never that simple. When we say there is no binyan and stira when it comes to kelim, that means one of three things. It mean one of three things. The most lenient approach, that's the approach of Rashi, and that seems to be the approach of the Vilna Gaon and others, is there is no binyan and stira b'kelim when it comes to this. By the way, this would answer Eli's question when it comes to the Lego, etc. Right? If we accept the middle approach or the more stringent approach. So we're essentially saying there is such a thing as binyan and stira b'kelim. It depends on when, it depends how. So the most lenient approach was Rashi. The Mishnah Berurah says the name of the Gra as well. He says basically, unless it's something which is really, really built together, we generally say there is no binyan and stira. If by destroying it or tearing a hole, etc., you're making a nice opening, you're violating the malachav makeh b'patish, something else you have to be careful. However, the Shulchan Aruch, the plain language of the Shulchan Aruch, seems to follow the Rosh, which is Tosfot second approach, which is more stringent, which says we say there's no binyan stira b'kelim of something that's already been broken and you kind of it's been reconstituted, and then we say, okay, it's a little bit like you can think of it like ein binyan achrei binyan. Maybe that's the way, right? We've spoken about ein bishul achar bishul. Once something's already been cooked, so you can't cook it again. Same idea, yeah. It's been built, it's been destroyed, it's been put together. Okay, it's finished. It's not binyan anymore. But barring that, that would still be a problem. Okay, that's how the Shulchan Aruch seems to ask it. Yeah.
There's no reference here to how you open the barrel, right? What the assumption is you're doing it with your bare hands. Because what if you have to pick up a tool?
I think not necessarily. Again, it's just what concerns us more here, I think, is the outcome, right? We'll discuss it. We'll discuss when we get to the camps and things, etc. Because we'll see some distinctions
Later on, right? Can't use a can on that, right?
We'll get to that. We'll get to this different types of cans, etc. Okay, but here it's just before we get there. It's interesting to note that Rav Ovadia, who, as we know, always follows the Shulchan Aruch, except when he doesn't, in this case rules against Maran. Okay, source number 18, Rav Ovadia here in Shuti Chavedat says, נמצא שרוב הפוסקים ועל צבא מעריף הרמב"ם סוברים שגם כלי שלם מותר לשבור בשבת כדי ליטול ממנו מאכל או משקה. Right? He says, now, the barrel that we can break open to get the food inside is not necessarily this reconstituted one, as the Shulchan Aruch says. It says the Rif, the Rambam, many of the poskim say that. And therefore, בקרוב לומר שגם מרן השולחן ערוך, אילו ראה דברי הפוסקים הנ"ל, היה פוסק להקל אפילו שלא במוסדקי. Okay, how does he rule against the Shulchan Aruch? He says if the Shulchan Aruch had seen some of the Rishonim that we've seen, so obviously he would have said the same thing. But he quotes here the Rashbats and the Rashbash, etc., and that is how he is lenient. Now the Ochot Shabbat, who is again one of the contemporary Sfarim on Ochot Shabbat, he says that even if we are going to take the more lenient position, okay, so then we still need to be concerned about Makeh Patish. So he says like this: Yesh ladat she'af hasovrim she'en binyan b'stira b'kelim מסכימים שמרכיב כלי על ידי תקיעת החלקים זה בזה. So even those who say there's really no binyan or stira b'kelim, but if you are attaching parts together very, very strongly, or שעושה כלי מתחילתו, or you form an entire כלי from scratch, חייב חטאת, it's going to be an איסור דאורייתא. Why? Because of makeh b'patish. הנפקא מינה מחלוקת הנ"ל בנידון binyan וסתירה בכלים ובשני אופנים. So if that's the case, what's actually the difference between these two opinions? So he says, number one, when you take it apart, if we say that there's binyan and stira b'kelim, that's going to be the malacha of destruction, dismantling. But if you're going to say the lenient view, right? So yeah, there's no makeh patish when you're taking it apart. That's number one. And number two, he says, if you attach pieces together, but you don't attach the whole thing together, so that would also be the difference. Okay, so now that we've seen basically the framework, the different opinions, the different arguments in terms of binyan stira b'kelim in general terms, let's go a little bit more specific. Let's zoom in to our packages and containers on Shabbat. Let's begin with cans. So it's very interesting. So you have cans. This discussion takes place quite going back a generation or two, and the poskim discuss sardine cans, right, whether you can open these on Shabbat or not. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, we have two contradictory approaches as to what the malacha, what the prohibition might involve. Look at source number 20. We're on page 216. Source number 20, which is the Tehillah LeDavid. So he says like this, he refers to the Magen Abraham, and he says, Yatsa lanu midvar Magen Abraham Okay, but with these sardine, right? Sardine cans. Shehem kelim gmulim asur lefotcham b'Shabbat. That it would be forbidden to open them on Shabbat. After Neima Shekal Asiyata Fideli, whatever that is, that the can, right? Kadesh Gmelu Betocham Sardine. Even though we'd say that why would you open what are the cans for? You'd open them in order to eat the sardines. Mikom Makom. Kevan Shehem Kelim Gmulim Asur Lefotcham Mishum Soter Deoraita. He says when they produce the cans, okay, you have now a can with the fish inside or whatever you've got inside. It is a can. It is a proper kli. It's a container. It's holding the food. When you open it, you are destroying the container. That is soter. It's like breaking open the barrel, right? You have a very nice barrel, a very nice can, which acts as a container. By opening it, you are destroying. And he says that would be an isur d'oraita. The mashim medubakim ashulayim v'atfanot be'eva pshita d'lo mikri nishbara. Nishbara v'davek shvaraya b'zefet v'atif tfayim mechubar yedei chishukim. Okay, essentially he says the fact that you have the side and the top of the cans that it's constructed and it's stuck together, however they make it, that is not like the case of this mustaki, of this reconstituted barrel. No, this is a proper kli. It's together. You open it, you're going to break it. Okay, that is the Tilal David. So he says opening the can would be a problem of soter. Comes the Chazon Ish, and he says exactly the opposite. He says opening the can would not be a problem of soter, but it would be a problem of binyan. You're creating a kli. How are you creating it? If the food's already there, you've already got the kli. So essentially what he says is like this. Let's read the Chazon Ish inside. He says, "Kufsaot shel shemen, o shel dagim asoyin mitasei balzel v'rtzufin mikol tzad." Essentially, right, you have these iron slabs covering the food, right? That's what we'd call a can. V'chotchin b'sakin et atash al hapetach. Okay, in those days, maybe before they started using can openers, they would cut them open with knives. Umakom asafek bazeu. So he says the question over here is when you intend to open up the can and throw everything away and just take the food out. He says maybe this is a problem that you are creating an opening when you open up the can. Okay, the world has changed a little bit since the days of the Chazon Ish. Nowadays, right, everybody has containers or Tupperwares or whatever. Nobody today is going to open it, and this is going to be grounds for leniency. Nobody's going to open up these cans and then keep the cans to store nails in or whatever. But his point is, when you're opening up the can, you are creating that. When it's closed, when it's sealed, there's nothing you can do with it. But when you open it, you're creating a good container. And that you can use and that you can reuse. Huh?
It's not a matter of kavanah.
So the kavanah is going to be part of it. That's going to be part of it. So he says, well, other poskim are going to say that. He says that the kavanah is not really going to help, and you'll see why. He says, Efshar, he says, even if your plan is to dispose of it, right, the intent does not help. אלא ביש לחבית פתח. אבל חלול בפנים וסתום מכל צד, כל שעושה לו פתח חשוב בעניין. He says the fact is that you are creating it in such a way, you're fashioning that opening, that's going to be a problem. So he says, essentially the last paragraph says, מיהו משום סתירת כלי ליקה כאן, שאין כאן סותר כלל. The Tilal David said the whole problem is an issue of soter. He says, no, what are you talking about? You're not destroying anything. Shaptichat tikun is by opening it, you're creating a tikun, you're fixing it, you're making it in such a way that you can use it. V'satum mikol tzad lav kliu. He's saying it's closed on every side, that's not considered a kli. Shasela petach na'aseh kli. When you make the petach, when you open it up, then it becomes a kli. So notice here, you have two completely opposite approaches, right? According to the Tilal David, he says, dafka, by opening up the can, you are destroying it. According to the Chazon Ish, by opening it up, you are creating the kli. Okay, so based on that, there are those who say that if the problem is opening, if you make a hole in the bottom of the can before you open it, then you can't use it, then it's not a kli, and then would not be a problem. That works if you say that the issue is that you're creating a kli, but if you say the problem is that you're destroying the kli, then no matter how many holes you make, that's going to be even worse. It's not going to help. So those are the different sides of the argument between the Tila David and the Chazon Ish. So let's just read the summary over here on page 217. Okay, it says the Orchot Shabbat clarifies that according to the Chazon Ish, one may not open cans of food if one intends to reuse them after the original contents have been removed, since one thereby has constructed a vessel. Okay, that's clear. According to the Chazon Ish's chiddush is that even if you don't intend to reuse it, there may still be a problem. But he says if you intend to reuse it, you're creating a kli, and that would not be okay. He says the Orchot Shabbat adds, based on the wording of the Chazon Ish, it seems there are reasons in the previous source. It seems there are 3 reasons to categorically prohibit opening these cans on Shabbat. Number 1, he says even if someone's not intending to reuse the specific can, it's being opened. One might come to open cans at other times when one does intend to reuse them. Number 2, someone might open the can and use only some of its contents, and that person desires to use the vessel to store the remainder of the contents. Number 3, even if one intends to dispose of it, one has formed a usable vessel since it was sealed previously and it is now open. Okay, so that is how the Orchot Shabbat understands the Chazon Ish. Okay, there are those who want to take a more lenient position even in the Chazon Ish. Okay, there are those who take a more lenient position against the Chazon Ish. But there are those who want to say maybe even the Chazon Ish would be a bit more lenient. Have a look over the page, number 22, the Piskei Teshuvot. Okay, Piskei Teshuvot says over here, he says, Kama memachavlei zmanenu, some contemporary poskim, katvu, שלדברי החזון איש הוא הדין בנידון לדן יש להחמיר, גם שאין מי שיחזיק אריזות לשימוש חוזר. Even the one who is not going to reuse the can, but it's still going to be forbidden. That's what the Orchot Shabbat said. He says at the end, אמנם שם מחברים הפריחו דבריהם קדימוך ממוצאות לשונו דחזון איש. In other words, there are those who want to say that maybe the kavanah does change a little bit. But this is what I mentioned before, the Shemrat Shabbat, number 23. He says, even according to the opinion of the Chazon Ish, this is the problem is metaken mana. The problem is that you are creating the kli. So he says, אם ניקבת הקופסה או קראת השקית או את הקופסה את החבילה בצידה או בתחתיתה עובר לפתיחתה, if you made a hole on the bottom before you opened it, right? He says, כך שלא תהיה עוד דוריה לשימוש בתוך כלי, then it would be allowed. Okay, so those are the first 2 opinions. So we have an opinion of the Chazon Ish who says a closed, a sealed container is not actually considered a container because the container is something I can use. I can put things in, I can take things out. There's no way to get anything out, then it's not considered a kli. And when I open the kli, now I'm turning it into a container, and therefore that is going to be a problem. That is one opinion. The other opinion is to say, no, I view it, it's a container, it's got stuff inside. The fact that I need to open it is something else, but that's the Tilal David. And he says, therefore, you are destroying the container by opening it, and you are not allowed to. Comes Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he says, no. He says, I agree with you that it's already a container. By opening it, you are not creating a new kli. But, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, but I'm going to say that really it is similar to the mustaki, and you are going to be allowed to open it. Okay, here's the Shemrat Shabbat Kilchata in source number 24. Okay, this is you'll notice that a lot of the sources here that we have from the Shemrat Shabbat are from the footnotes. Many of the comments of all the comments of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach are printed in the footnotes of the Shemrat Shabbat Kilchata. And as we mentioned many times before, the joke is that the Shemrat Shabbat Kilchata is a kli shemelachto l'isur. Because you look inside, everything says asur, asur, asur. When you look at the footnotes, then you see Rav Shlomo Zalman said this is mutar, Rav Shlomo Zalman said yesh la'ayin, Rav Shlomo Zalman said this. Okay, but that only works for the original Shemrat Shabbat Kilchata. When they translated it years ago, they translated the Shemrat Shabbat into English, and they didn't translate the footnotes. That really was a kli shemelachto l'isur. In any event, maybe the original with the footnotes is a kli shemelachto l'isur v'le'eter. Okay, we could say that. But in any event, he says here in the footnotes, source number 24, he says, Shamati me Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, tam lehatil de mistabla, a reason to permit opening these cans. Says when they close it in the factory, why do they close it in the factory? In order that you can use it for a long time, you can preserve the food, you can transport it. Even though now, when it's been sealed up, you cannot reach in or take out of the can, right, he says, nonetheless, it's reasonable to say that that sealing it on Shabbat would be called boneh, it would not be called soter. This is the point. Then what do you do when you open, generally speaking, people open cans, they take the food out and they throw the can away? Okay, so what's the chiddush over here? When we saw the case of the mustaki, this barrel that was reconstituted in the Gemara, we said it was a barrel that was reconstituted. Why do we say, all right, according to Tosfot, why do we say that there is no problem of binyan or stira when it comes to this? Because objectively, it's a barrel that it can't really be used. It's already been broken. It's an inferior vessel. It's not something that you can easily put back together. Yeah, the can is very good. The can is very, very solid. The issue is not in terms of the way that it's built, but in terms of what it's used for. Maybe it's called the intent. But again, the point is, it's not that the intent of an individual, it's the intent of Rav Ha'olam. It's the functioning of this. So although it is the can itself is not going to fall apart, but nonetheless, since its major use is for the to go into the trash, therefore he compares it to that mustaki. מכל מקום משמע שהיו רגילים להשתמש פה הרבה פעמים, ואפילו אחי מותר לשבר וגם לעשות פנקב. There, with that mustaki in the Gemara, it seems they would use it many, many times. And nonetheless, you're allowed to puncture a hole in it. So too, over here, הכינמי בנידון דידן, רואים את הקופסה כעומדת להיפתח ולזרק ולא להסתתר. We view it as it's about to be dismantled and it's about to be thrown away. ומה שמצאנו שאסור לשפול נקב כלי שלם, היינו מפני שאז היו רגילים להשתמש בה שימוש חוזר. That's when they would use it again and again. אבל בזמן הזה רגילים לזרוקן מיד להשפעה. But nowadays, we just throw it away. לכן יש מקלים לשפול, לפתוח, לדעת, לזרוק את הקופסה לאחר הוצאת המאכל. And therefore, there is what to rely on over here. Okay, it's not clear from the Shmat Shabbat. At the end of the day, if he's at the end of the day, he says yesh makilim. He says there are those who are lenient, meaning he doesn't want to necessarily accept us as a way to be lenient lachatchila. But what certainly is the case, so a person does not have to be stringent. Let's say you're a guest in somebody else's house and you see them opening the cans on Shabbat. You don't have to say, they weren't allowed to open the cans. Even if your minhag is not to open the cans, you can eat the food on Shabbat. We certainly have Rav Shlomo Zalman to rely on to say that it can be done on Shabbat. Okay. However, even he agrees that if one opens the can, one intends to reuse the can, so then you should not be opening it on Shabbat. That's what he says here in source number 25 in the footnote, which is actually an earlier footnote, right? מקום מקום בזה שמשנה את שימוש הכלי להיותו ראוי להוציא להכניס, שפיר חשיב כזה כלי. אולם לדעתו כל זה דווקא כאשר מתכוון להשתמש בקופסה, גם אחרי שהוציא את האוכל מתוכה, if he intends to reuse it. Okay, bottom line is, we'll see over here the Yalkut Yosef, the Shmirat Shabbat, source number 29 as well. They both say that look at Chila, ראוי ונכון לפתוח מבעוד יום את כל הכלים החתומים שבתכונתם יצא להשתמש בשבת ויום טוב. Ideally, one should open everything before Shabbat, all the cans that you want to use. But as we've seen, if one does not open them before, so long as one is not reusing the cans, there are certainly poskim who one can rely on in order to open them. Okay, a separate kind of can. I think we'll stop there for today. Maybe we'll pick this up next week. We've been talking about the sardine cans or the tuna cans or whatever. Nowadays, everything has got the pull tops, and we have Yeah, every year you bring out your containers for Pesach. So I remember a number of years ago, we always said we never had a can opener for Pesach. That was always the thing. Every year it's going by the can opener. Nowadays we have a Pesach can opener. I don't know when we last used it because every can that you buy, it's got a ring top and you can pull it up. Who uses can openers these days? Okay, but that is the cans that we've been discussing until now. If you go back on page 217 at the bottom, you'll see the picture. Okay, they look a little bit different nowadays, but that's essentially where the entire top of the can is removed. Okay, and that's it. What about drink cans, soda cans, Coca-Cola, etc., where it has the sort of tab, and when you pull it, that creates a very specific opening in a very specific place? Would that be a separate issue in terms of creating a hole and opening the can? You can see page 200, if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about. Page 224, there's a picture at the bottom, but we'll talk about that next week. So we've seen the general principles, we've seen the early discussions in terms of cans. So we have other cans to talk about, we have packages, we have the bottle caps. Everybody wants to know about the bottle caps, the wine, the grape juice, etc. Can you open those? We'll talk about that next week. Bezrat Hashem, and then we'll get on to the next topic of home maintenance and Shabbat. Okay, I've come for today. Have a good day, everybody, and wonderful week.